crowd. This is actually a repeat of what we did before, and we had a capacity crowd. We actually had to turn people away before, so this is wonderful. So thank you for being here. Yeah, we're the Morehouse Museum. Our mission is to be the home of Benton Harbor history, and so we love topics like this that can share this. And this is one of those things too, I think lots and lots of people have lived in this area for a long time and like, ship canal? Like they never noticed a ship canal here. So, so it's a very great topic. If you haven't had a chance, we do have the exhibit up yet. This is our last day for the exhibit. So if you'd like to check out some different items and lots of great photographs from the ship canal. So, all right. So let me grab this here. So let me tell you a story of kind of the start of Benton Harbor. So before, in the early days, and we can do here, so an old map of Benton Harbor, right? Here we have the village of St. Joe, founded in the 1820s or so. And starting in the 1830s, a number of people kind of came down the Territory Road. Before Michigan was a state, this road right out in front of the Morton House was the Territory Road. Came from Detroit all the way to Benton Harbor. And it brought farmers. And it's going to be a little hard for you to see, but this is E and HC, Eliezer and Henry Morton. We have Stern Brunson here, Charles Hull here. And these farmers lived east of the river, and especially started growing fruit. You know, this the lake effect is great for making this a fruit growing place. And they brought their products over to St. Joe, and originally went by bridge. In the spring of 1859, there was a huge flood, and the flood took out the bridge between St. Joe and Benton Harbor. So a committee of farmers from this side of the river went up to St. Joe and said, hey, let's work together to rebuild the bridge. And unfortunately, the people in St. Joe, like, we don't really care if there's a bridge or not. So they rebuilt the bridge, but also started thinking maybe we don't want to be dependent on St. Joe. And they started having the idea here of a canal. Canals were a big thing. Erie Canal, 1825. There were other canals in the Midwest and they said, you know what, why don't we just bypass St. Joe and put ourselves on the lake? And so these three guys, Stern Brunson, this is Henry C. Morton, that guy back there, if you look at that picture too, and Charles Hull. If you know Benton Harbor, these are also three elementary schools that were named after them. And they basically formed a committee that said, let's build a canal. And so they went over to Chicago and they found this guy, Martin Green. Martin Green had a dredging and contracting business in Chicago, apparently did pretty well. I find it pretty interesting that he was willing to come over to Benton Harbor to do this job. And this is 1860 where they start doing that. He had an office right where the Merchandise Mart is today, if you know where that is in Chicago, kind of right on the river. Did lots of dredging, lots of building of docks and things like that. And a pretty interesting life, Martin Green. He came over and built the canal and then stayed, became a fruit farmer for a while. In 1871, something happened in Chicago that called him back. Great Chicago Fire, and he went back and he did a lot of building and rebuilding of Chicago after the Great Chicago Fire. Apparently exhausted himself. On the advice of his doctor, he was advised to move back to his ancestral home back in Worcester, Massachusetts. I think it's how you pronounce it, W-R-C-E-S-T-E-R. Looks like Worcester, but I think they pronounce it Worcester. And there's still a park in Worcester that used to be the Green family estate here. So, and then he also this is a little off topic if you don't mind, but we have a couple high school students who are earning extra credit for U.S. history, so we're doing a little bit extra here for them. He had a brother, Andrew Green, and Andrew Green was actually known as the father of Greater New York. So New York used to be just Manhattan. Brooklyn used to be like the third biggest city in America, I think, something like that. And he was basically the idea that said, let's put all these different cities together to make New York City. He also had a tragic end. He was killed on his front porch by a guy who thought he was sleeping with his wife. It turned out he wasn't. It was mistaken identity, but he was killed in the city. So they brought Martin Green over to build the canal, and one of the things that those three guys did is to raise money. They donated land, they donated wood to power the dredge, and they got all kinds of people to do that. So this is the Benton Harbor Ship Canal. This is 100 shares that Henry Morton bought in theirs, and so it was very much a community effort to build this canal. And it really is here. It is really the start of Benton Harbor. It is the beginning of the Benton Harbor is the building of this canal. So maybe we should call it a birth canal. I'm in trouble. My wife told me I could not tell that joke. I'm sorry.
And he still does.
You can't pass up that joke. Right. So I'm going to have some making up to do, I think. So I'm sorry. Yeah. So.
We're trying to get that past the board too. What did we say?
We mixed it.
Yeah. We had the Lions Club here, and I got fined for telling that joke. Fined the Lions Club.
Fined again.
Yeah, I think this will be the third time I've been fined for that same joke.
It's a great joke. I'll pay your fine.
Thank you. Yeah, Ed in the red sweater will take your money. So this is a great picture, I think, showing the early canal here. So St. Joe up on the hill, Lake Michigan. This is the old Planks Tavern, right? Not Tavern. That's Planks Hotel. Yeah, Planks Tavern today. And then the canal coming this way. And you can see that this is like 10th Street. So this is kind of downtown Benton Harbor. All of this area was basically swamp and marsh. And they had to, one of the things they did is when they dug out the canal, they used some of the dirt and material for building this road there because it was all wetlands going through there. And so you can see that originally Benton Harbor is not on the river. It's not on the lake, and the canal puts them on the lake, which is really strategic, really makes a difference for them. And one of the things too that I think is interesting to me as someone who I grew up in Michigan, and one of the things I love about Michigan is it's easy to tell directions because most everything is laid out north, south, east, west. Most of our roads are that way. And one of the things, I used to have an apartment in St. Joe, and St. Joe is not laid out north, south, and it bothered me when I looked out what I thought was my east-facing window, and then the sun is not rising in that spot and stuff. But St. Joe is laid out because of the lake. And I don't know if you've ever seen, downtown Benton Harbor is also not north, south, east, west. And I never knew until we did this research why it wasn't laid out north, south, east, west. But so you can see it's laid out parallel to the canal. The canal really dictates how downtown Benton Harbor is laid out there. Okay. All right, so they built the canal, and it really gets Benton Harbor going. Lots of businesses come in, especially lumber is a big business. And I'll show you some pictures and some maps and stuff. But the lumber industry in the late 1800s in Michigan, we basically cut down all the trees in Michigan, right? And they cut them down and brought them to places like Benton Harbor. And in these places, they turn them into some kind of product. A big one here is fruit packaging, making baskets and bushel kind of stuff for the fruit. So this was Graves Lumber Company's Colby Hinckley is another one. This is a Sanborn fire map, which I love. They did it for insurance purposes, but this shows the canal. This is the Stevenson Morton. So the Mortons were involved in the shipping. We'll get to that a little bit, but they also had a lumber company. So this is all just like big piles of lumber on this side of the canal, right? Right, and a little bit closer here, but you can see this is J.B. Graves and Company lumber yards. So just wood all over the place. So that was a huge business for Benton Harbor. So this is a color map of those. So this is kind of interesting too. This is the St. Joe River. This is where Reith Riley now used to be. Help me out, folks. Kinney.
Imperial 400?
Yeah, Consumers Asphalt used to be. Imperial 400 used here. You can see there actually used to be an island there. This is H.W. Williams. So this is about where Clifford's Coffee Canal is today. And they had kind of a little island there. So another picture for lumber. Preston. Preston is a big St. Joe name, family name. But Preston Lumber was on Main Street in Benton Harbor also. And then also there was a big mill. So we did milling of grain and things like that down here. And then another big one was boat building, right? We have three big companies. I'm not going to talk about Truscott. That was more St. Joe. I'm going to talk about the other two that were kind of the big ones here. I hope you enjoy. It's our only action photo that we have today here. So control your excitement there. So yeah, launching the boat there. We do have one other action photo, two action photos. That's it though, after him. So, right. And this is the canal, right, looking towards downtown Benton Harbor. Is this the one? So, and this is the shipyard of Edward Wright Heath. And he was a boat builder from 1890 to 1900 on the canal. And we have a connection here at the Morton House. So this lady back here is Carrie Heath. She was the wife of James Stanley Morton. We call him Stanley. He went by Stanley. And her father was Salmon Heath. And he was the founder of Heath's Corners, which becomes Fairplane. Heath's Corners is Colfax and Napier. So that was Heath's Corners. And so Edward is Carrie's brother. He builds boats on the canal for about 10 years, goes out of business, goes bankrupt. The bank repossesses his place, and we'll talk about why in a minute. And then he decides to move out to the Pacific Northwest. So this is Carrie. It's a great picture, isn't it? Yeah, 1893. When he got out there, he started building boats out there. This guy walks into his plant. He says, "Hey, I want you to build me like a pleasure craft, cabin cruiser kind of thing." The guy that walked in there was William Boeing, and William Boeing hires him, and then later hires him to work to make airplanes. If you know Boeing, Edward Heath built this before it was Boeing Airplane Company #1. This was Edward Heath's plant, and it's still there today in a museum. They have like what do they call it? I don't remember the name of the museum, but Edward Heath from Benton Harbor built that. And I was looking at even some different maps there. So they have a Southwest Michigan Street right near where he built boats and then built airplanes. So we have a local connection to the Boeing company. So, And then after him, this I want to talk about too. He also went bankrupt out in the Pacific Northwest here. And apparently his boats were too good, is why he went bankrupt. His ideals were his undoing. His financial woes sprang from a pension to build boats that were too good. Even his employees knew it. Heath once said, I always put more into a ship than he got out, right? So best materials, best workmanship, and just couldn't turn a profit there. So, and we also have then Dashiell Carter here. So this is the canal in the back, and this building is on the spot and is apparently still essentially part of what they call the Whirlpool Tech Center. So right on Riverview Drive there, right across the canal from Connexus, they're building a new apartment building right across the street there. That was Dashiell Carter, started in 1924, and second here. You can see here, this is the canal. Riverview today kind of goes this way there, and take a look at all the boats they're doing. Originally they did fishing boats, harbor tugs, Coast Guard patrol boats, so working boats is kind of what they did. Some other pictures here of Dashiell Carter. Yep, some good-sized boats there. And I love this one of the employees. So one of the things is they did well in the 1920s, and then in the 1930s, what's going to hit? Great Depression, and it was really tough on Dashiell Carter and also the next business. Dashiell Carter got down to 3 employees during the Great Depression, and then they were rescued by World War II, and they went gangbusters. And that in World War II, they had over 600 employees. So they went from 3 employees during the Great Depression to 600 during World War II, and including Rosie the Riveter types. Right? So this is a picture in front of the Dashiell Carter building. One of the Dashiell Carter employees was a guy named Glenn Robinson, and he left Dashiell Carter to start his own business called the Robinson Marine. I think it's actually a Robinson Marine Construction Company there. And this building is right on the canal. We had a great fundraiser there this summer. It's now a private residence, and it's amazing. So if you ever get a chance to check that out, it's a really cool place. And they built like these elegant cabin cruisers here, including this one called the Flying Cloud. This was originally built by Olds of Oldsmobile. He owned it, and then he sold it to a guy named Al Capone. And Al Capone owned it. Al Capone lost it because he didn't pay his taxes, and the boat was seized because of that. So mainly Olds and Capone used it down in Florida, but this was a Robinson Marine Company boat. It's a great looking boat, isn't it? So, all right, and then the other big business we want to talk about is the Graham and Morton Steamship Company, and especially here at the Morton House, we want to talk about that. So Eliezer was the original Morton. His son Henry was one of the 3 founders with building the ship canal, and then Stanley back here was kind of the 3rd generation, and he started the Graham and Morton Steamship Company. And they basically ran boats, brought fruit over to Chicago, and brought tourists back. And they tell the story that people would pick fruit in the afternoon, they would put it on a night boat. By the next morning, people in Chicago were buying that fruit. And then they brought tourists over here to House of David Amusement Park, right, Silver Beach Amusement Park, and brought lots of tourists. So this is the Churning Basin, and this is winter quarters. So this is 3 or 4 of the Graham and Morton boats that were brought down there. Here's a picture of the fruit. These are the farmers in their wagons lining up. So this is actually, if you know, this is 6th Street. This is where the Benton Harbor Library is today. They would go down Territorial and then down Territorial to basically where the glassworks is, right, there, and put that fruit on the boat. And so here's some other Graham & Morton ships in the canal. And it was very much a big business. They had lots of liners, late 1890s and early 1900s especially, had 5 big boats that would run back and forth. Also went to Holland, Saugatuck, Michigan City at different times. So that was a really important business. So this is the turning basin. So this is essentially where the Hinckley Building and help me out, the Glassworks. Water Street, thank you. I should ask you especially. So Water Street Glassworks. This is about where the Ghost Light Theater is today. And this is just a parking lot today, but that was originally the turning basin. So came all the way into downtown Benton Harbor. And then this is the Graham Morton. This was kind of their warehouse, and then they built kind of an office building for their offices where Stanley Morton would be. This is also became the first post office for Benton Harbor. And this is their headquarters. So this is the Morton building, Graham & Morton building. It's now that vacant lot right next to the Citadel Dance Center, and used to be Bramwell Supply. Now it's apartments there with Bramwell. So, so a really cool building there. And so a big part of the canal was these great, liners going up and down. City of Grand Rapids, City of Benton Harbor, the Chicora, the ill-fated Chicora, you maybe know that story, is the only boat they ever really lost. City of Chicago, City of St. Joe, these really amazing liners. So that was an important business in there. And in 1915, Stanley Morton kind of made a fateful decision here to build what they called the Central Docks. So they did unload passengers in St. Joe, and then went to downtown Benton Harbor, and they said, let's put a dock right kind of in the middle. So this is right on St. Joe River here. This is the canal here. Again, this is now what used to be Consumers Asphalt and there. But they built that building there to kind of consolidate things. And so instead of the ships going down to downtown Benton Harbor, mainly they kind of stopped here. And here's another view of that from the Main Street side. So you would, the ship would dock here, you'd get out on the top level, and that would take you to the second floor of this building. The freight would go into the ground floor and the baggage and things like that. And then you would walk down here to, waiting taxis or whatever to go to House of David Amusement Park and other places. So that's Main Street right there. So, this is Patrick M. Kinney, who was an early businessman in Benton Harbor. And you maybe know of Jack Kinney. We should say another thank you. I don't think he's here today, but thank you to Jack Kinney, who's been a great supporter of this project and the Morton House generally here. This is his great-grandfather and an early businessman. But then Jack Kinney eventually bought the Central Docks. Some people remember there used to be a roller skating rink in the second floor.
Yeah.
Did you skate there?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Do you want to describe it for us?
No, it's just with a wide open, complete whole floor. When you got to the top of that ramp, it's on a level floor.
Yeah.
There was a wood floor up there, and we just roller skated the whole top
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he bought that building, and then unfortunately the building burned in 1975. And so then he used it as dock space for, asphalt and stones and things like that. The problem was, though, then is that the canal became largely unused. It started to get overgrown, not very well maintained. And as we get into the 1920s, things start to change for Stanley Morton and the steamship line. Instead of people taking boats from Chicago, they start using these new things called automobiles. And the fruit growers, instead of putting their fruit on the boats, they start taking trucks to different places. And business starts to decline. In the 1920s, the Graham Morton steamship line is taken over by the Goodrich line. Stanley's still an officer, but kind of the Graham and Morton line lasted from 1875 to about 1925. And then the Great Depression hits, and things are even worse. And by the time we get to the 1930s, this is the city of Benton Harbor. Once this amazing, gleaming liner is now abandoned, and eventually they're scrapped, and they are no more. We do have one remnant if you check it out. I assume Kate didn't we? We have the whistle from the city of Grand Rapids. After it was taken off the boat in the 1930s, it became a work whistle for a factory. They blew the whistle to call their employees, and now we have it. So it's one of my dreams is to hear that whistle again. So if anybody I could know how to rig up a steam whistle and blow it for you, let me know here. So would be a great thing. So so the canal becomes unused, and the late 1930s they start talking about filling it in. And by 1940, the turning basin is filled in. This is a later picture where it was narrowed. This is maybe 40 or 50 feet today, if you ever can find the canal and see it. On the east side of Riverview Drive. Originally it was 100 or 125 feet wide, stretching all the way into downtown Benton Harbor. So they filled in the turning basin and up to about 9th Street in about 1940 or so. Before they actually filled it in, one of the things they advertised to people is like, hey, why don't you just bring your garbage and stuff and dump it into the turning basin, because we're going to fill it anyway. And if you look in the display case out here, when Water Street Glassworks put up their metalworking building, they did some digging and they found a bunch of artifacts that Kathy Catania voted to us, right? And maybe at some point, like in another 100 years or so, we're going to dig up that parking lot and we're going to find all these cool archaeological finds under that parking lot.
What's the water in front of Clifford's Coffee Canal?
That is the canal, and that's the original width. So up until Riverview Drive, if you look at that, you can kind of envision. But that was the width all the way to downtown Benton Harbor. But that's the canal. Yep. So, and just 2 or 3 down is where the Robinson Marine, towards Lake Michigan, was the Robinson Marine Company. So,
What's the depth? What was the depth?
boy, got that somewhere. Yeah, they kept making it wider and deeper,
Okay.
right? But I want to say like 40 or 50 feet at some point. I mean, you look at those ships, these are big ships that are going all the way downtown. It had to be pretty deep, I think. So, let me show you one more too that shows the filled in the canal and gives you an idea there. So again, St. Joe, Lake Michigan. So the canal came down here. This is about 9th Street. So here, this was the turning basin, which now we have these cars. Benton Harbor is prospering in the 1940s and 50s. They need parking lots for customers, for shoppers, and like, let's have more parking lots. So they filled in the canal up to them. And this is now narrower there today. But you can also see over here kind of the new version of the fruit market, right? So again, those fruit wagons used to line up and bring them into this building here and put them on there. And then later on, the fruit market is right over here. So this is the House of David cold storage building. And then here, we've got the fruit market, which is now trucks. Instead of putting them on ships, we are now doing trucks. So there were a couple of ideas and attempts, especially in the 1990s, early 2000s, is to reinvigorate, redig the canal, make it into, I mean, people love waterfront property, right? It is kind of this maybe amazing unused kind of place that maybe someday, once again, we'll see boats coming down that canal. So that's the history of the Benton Harbor Ship Canal. So, thank you. What kind of questions do you have? Not covered here. What questions? Do you have questions? Yeah. Stu, good to see you.
Good to see you. Stanley Martin in his book has a ledger of all the investors of the canal. It's a very interesting picture.
It is.
People putting in $5, $10, farmers from all over the area pitching in to dig the canal. It's a fascinating part of the book.
It's a great document, and it lists like, they gave some, wood, they gave, some money, all kinds of different things during the effort. It's a great picture of this community effort, And one of the things we have in our archives here is we have those original documents of like the list of those kind of things that I think Stanley used when he was writing his book. So,
What year was this picture taken?
Boy, I'm guessing that this is probably 50s, I would guess. I think it's in the 50s that the canal gets narrowed. So could be 40s. Someone there. If you haven't seen it, we have an amazing picture in here of it's an aerial view of the 1937 Blossom Parade. It's amazing how many people are lining the streets of Benton Harbor for that parade. And it's also, there's not a parking spot to be had in Benton Harbor, and just the building. So it's in this room. If you get a chance, you definitely ought to check it out if you know the Blossom Parade. It's really remarkable, and it also shows the whole canal in that picture too.
So it's the Rachel Carter building, the last structure.
That would be this building right here, Statue Carter. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's where Whirlpool, that building, is today.
I was there when I was about this tall.
Yeah.
My mom took me to watch them launch a minesweeper out of the Rachel Carter building.
Very cool. Would this be World War II years or?
World War II.
Nice.
In the 1940s.
Very cool. Yeah.
That was a busy place then.
Yeah, they were cranking out boats, them and Robinson Marine. So Robinson Marine, their building would be kind of about right here. And then Robinson Marine also had they did most of the shipbuilding over here on the island. What do we call this? Terminal Island?
Industrial Island.
Industrial Island, thank you, So, other questions? Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking, my mom said that her grandma used to come over from Chicago on a boat.
Yeah.
Might have been the city of St. Joe or something, and there used to be an old bandstand on the bluff, even when I was growing up, before they built the new bandstand.
Okay, yeah.
And I think people used to come up there from the boat, but it was a huge tourist thing for people from Chicago.
Yeah, my understanding, I think they would make a couple of stops. They would stop in St. Joe for the people who wanted to go to Silver Beach or St. Joe, and then they would continue on originally to downtown Benton Harbor and then later to the Central Docks.
There was also for a short time a period when people that wanted to get married from Chicago would come to St. Joe on one of the G&M ships, and they were trying to do it before their parents caught them.
Yeah.
So there
And then, if I remember from our book, the ship was called the Splicer.
Oh, was it?
It's the boat we took to come over and get married, the Splicer.
So it would actually have like a private dock up to the courthouse. So the young people could come off, get married, and on the way back make it so their parents couldn't dispute it anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. How does the railroad play into the canals? Because I know that there are canals everywhere. And so I was wondering, other than the Great Lakes and the advantage and the volume that you could ship, that you explained, bringing the lake inland.
Yeah.
But why didn't they just, instead of building another bridge, they built the canal? Why didn't they just wait for the railroad, or what?
Yeah.
just like the trucking industry taking over that you mentioned,
Yeah.
cars and trucks. And,
Yeah, I don't know. You did the railroad. We were also writing a book on the canal. She did the railroad stuff. I don't know if you want to handle that. I know it kind of supplemented it and complemented it, I think.
When railroads first came out, it wasn't a cohesive plan. It was a bunch of investors would decide that we're going to run a train from Berrien Springs to Niles, and then somebody else would do one from Dowagiac to Sister Lakes. So there was no plan at the time that would make sense to have trains be a primary function for moving stuff. Graham and Morton actually did have relationships with a couple different railroads where they would bring their goods or their tourists even to certain locations, and then the railroad, because like Grand Rapids was advertised as being a destination for the G&M ship.
So they would take the boat to Holland and then take the railroad to Grand Rapids.
Yeah. So, but there actually still are train lines that run next to the canal.
Yeah.
So you can see this one is the one still there today, and then there was also this railway line. So this is a bridge across there that's no longer there, but we had a railroad that ran through there.
And on the other side of the turning basin, I get confused on which direction is which here, so I can't say north, south, east, or west. But there was actually a big grain storage place built that was like top of the line. It had elevators that could unload 2 train cars worth of grain like in 2 minutes. It was crazy.
Yeah, that would have been about right here.
Yeah. And it also had some marine leg thing that came out that was so beyond what anybody in the area, including Chicago, had for unloading back into a ship that we were way ahead of the times on that. So did that answer your question, or did I go off on a tangent?
Yeah, what is
There's
the
so much.
bridge that's going, that one?
This one? That's the
State
current,
Street or-
that's M63 bridge that's going across there.
So that's after State
No.
Street Bridge was taken down?
I think so, yeah, because State Street would have gone right next to these elevators here, these bins, right? So this would have been State Street there. So, yeah, I don't know if anybody knows when the State Street Bridge got taken down. This would be after that. But
1954, I believe.
okay, so this has to be after 54 probably. So I'm guessing late 50s.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, that bridge was down, boy, my dad's boat was docked on that bridge abutment, and he died in 52, so that bridge had to come down. Actually, we can check with the yacht club, because that's when the Blessing Bridge went in and they lost their building.
And I know that Riverview crosses over the canal in the early 60s, because I know that's about when that VW dealership was built. That's where the apartment building's going in now. If you remember the VW place, Volkswagen. Yes.
So great talk today, and I like
Thanks.
the tie with Boeing. All world events have a tie to Southwest Michigan.
Yeah, and especially aviation. You've talked about Augustus Herring,
Exactly.
first in flight, right?
Could you run your finger where the canal used to extend to the southern, I'm saying southern
Yeah.
portion?
Uh,
And
so-
where would Little Italy be if it was still here
Yeah.
today? Would it be down in? on
So this
bottom
would have
part?
been the extension of the canal, and then this is the turning basin right here, right? So
Okay.
Territorial runs right here, and then Little Italy is kind of north of Territorial,
Okay,
be there. So not far.
no, okay, thank you.
Other questions? Well, let me say one other thing, just an advertisement. So we're kind of closed in the winter till April and stuff, and look for our events for next year. One of the things that I've been asked to do is to give a talk on the Graham and Morton shipping line at the Maritime Museum in South Haven. That's going to be Wednesday, January 17. One of the great things we have at the Morton House is all kinds of great photographs of these ships. And so we'll talk about Mr. Graham and Mr. Morton and the story of that, and we'll talk about what happened at Chicora and City of Chicago. There's a great story about what happened in the City of Chicago. So keep an eye on that if you want to check their website. But Wednesday, January 17th.
You'll also be doing a talk on the Territorial Road. Your
Yes,
experience.
April, right?
April in
Yeah.
South Haven at the Scott Club.
Yeah. So yeah, the Scott Club in South Haven, April. Yeah. So in 2015, I rode my bike across Michigan, trying to retrace the Territory Road, and I always wanted to write a book, and so I wrote a book about the trip. So yeah, I'll be talking about that. Pardon?
It sounds as though you need to get yourself a little website.
MortonHouseMuseum.org.
What is it?
MortonHouseMuseum.org.
That's it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. So, that's who pays my checks. Yeah.
Can you point out where the livery would be in that photo?
Yeah, so the livery would not be on this photo. This is about where Ghost Light, so livery would be kind of here. I don't know if I had any other pictures that would show where the livery is. I'm not sure I do. If you see me after, we could probably find something, but so. Yeah,
Well, what are the
because this is
buildings-
kind of downtown Benton Harbor, more so here.
Any
This is
idea
really
what the building is right at the bottom?
right here.
Right there.
Yeah, this is Water Street Glassworks today, the Hinckley building, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And then I think this is the Graham and Morton building that is now that vacant lot across Water Street, not Water, across Bridge Street, I think.
They back right up to that parking lot with the water.
Well, thank you very much for coming. We have lots more desserts, so you should get more desserts if you haven't already. If you haven't gotten some, get some. Get a second plate before you go. If you haven't seen the house, lots of great Dickens decorations, ship canal pictures. So enjoy the house, enjoy the desserts. Thank you very much for coming. Happy holidays.
Discover my zipper unzipped here. Not a good thing.
We were kids, we could say, your barn
Barn doors open, and the horse is gonna get out. Somebody else can,
Give me 1 second. I gotta get this.